Yo, Brianna got the Borderlands cell shading? Let's go. Yo, what the? It's just about validating her own experience, making her own life better, and making life better for her little group. Knee surgery? What?
Let me talk some!
Are you gonna let me finish once?
We can put a clock up, girl!
Let me just finish one thought.
Just like, what even is it? Like, narcissistic? Just like, has to be the one talking, has to be the star of the show all the time. Yes, I'm chopped. Yes, I'm broke. Yes, my vibe is off-putting. Yes, I'm low-key a bum. Well, I mean, wait, why'd she scoff at that? Why'd she scoff at that? I don't understand. Wait, that sounds reasonable. Not been the star of the show for 5 minutes. Seething. Because the moderator wants to let Marcy talk.
Sorry, this is goofiness. Let's just...
Dude, no way your doctor calling you goofy.
Come on.
Okay, so... let's have a look at this. So, here's this podcast called The Disagreement, alright? Brianna Wu has appeared on The Disagreement, listed as an expert in gender-affirming care and trans rights, okay? Experts debate the future. Gender-affirming care and trans rights. Now, do we care about trans rights here? No. Do we care about medicine here? Certainly not. What I do care about is Brianna Wu pretending to understand things more than she truly does and embarrassing herself on live streams. And I've heard that's what happens here. Now, she's debating some woman. Cis woman here. I assume this woman is, she's an MD, I believe. She's an MD. So I guarantee she understands this better than why did I just go to say trans something? Better than Brianna Wu does. Where was that going? Where was I going with that? Okay, so we're gonna watch this, okay, guys? We're gonna watch this debate. I think it's gonna be awesome. I've heard Brianna Wu totally freaks out. Wait, she's the doctor that performed Wu's bottom surgery? No way. So Brianna Wu is debating her own bottom surgery doctor. What the? Why is the name of this podcast Experts Debate the Future of Gender-Affirming Care and Trans Rights, and not Brianna Wu debates her own chopper, her own surgeon, her own... Yeah, why is that not the framing of this? Her own butcher. If she loses the debate, she gets it stitched back on. Okay, let's watch. Let's see what happens here.
All right. And actually, before we start, I have a suggestion. Can we, just talking today, I know it's going to be, I know there's some disagreements. Can we assume good intent for everyone on this call today?
Dude.
I think all of us are trying.
That sounds like I'm about to be insanely dishonest this entire time. Why do you have to preface by saying, can we assume good intent? How about you just have the debate?
To get to the right answers, even if we don't agree on what those are right now. I would love for us to feel that way.
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been my attitude for decades, is that I think we need to talk more to people. I come from a small town in the Midwest, and there's a lot of good people in this country.
Of course there are.
And the reason why trans...
I've noticed that after Brianna loses the debate, she leaves the internet for a month. It happened again this time. Well, she always talks about this, she claims to have some problem that's going to make her lose her voice, but I thought we were already past the deadline for when she was supposed to have retired from public appearances. And then she had like she's claimed to have had like surgeries that fixed it, and then it didn't, and then she comes back with like a more chopped up face. I can never quite figure out what's going on there. I can never figure it out. When this gonna be mute?
Trans care,
yeah,
was a lightning rod for division and contentiousness is the fact that people just don't know. They don't know. They don't understand the biology. They believe what they're told, maybe, or they are fearful of what they don't know.
Yeah.
So,
I think there's also
Brianna got the cell shading. Brianna got the Borderlands cell shading. Let's go. What the?
But we'll get into that.
Yeah, well, that was a perfect transition. We've never really done like kind of a live rolling start before, but I feel like Marcy, that was.
Oh, is she trans? I don't know. I just assumed it was a cis doctor. I'm going to be real. I just assume it's cis. I just assume doctor doing healthcare. It's probably a cis person. Is Marcy Bowers trans? I don't know. I could sense that from the voice, but it could be a smoker by the same merit. Marcy Bowers trans? Question mark. Yeah, it sounds like she is. I think so. Yeah.
That was a really nice way to kick us off. So, thank you both for being here.
Of course.
This is a fraught time for everyone, and particularly for trans people. It's obviously a deeply difficult time, and I am excited to have you both here and be able to learn from both of you and have a really good faith conversation. So, with that, it would be helpful to build on what Marcy was saying and just get a little context for like why you're here, why the trans rights movement is important to you, why you care, and just create a little context for our listeners. So I'll start. Brianna, you want to jump in?
I would love to. First of all, can I call you Marcy today?
Absolutely.
Or do you prefer Dr. Bowers? So Marcy, I want to start by telling you a story I remember from when you did my vaginoplasty, which was 18 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
And this, I think, really illustrates who you are as a person. And first of all, before I tell this story, 18 years, not a single problem, no stenosis, no anything. It functions perfectly. Top of the line, no complaints whatsoever. Thank you so much. I've been married for 17 years now, and your surgery was not a small part of why that was able to happen. So thank you very much. I doubt you remember this because you've just had so many patients, but there was when you did my surgery, there was a trans girl in our unit, older, was clearly going to have trouble passing. And the nurses in Trinidad, I know you saw this firsthand, were not always kind to the patients as we were going through. I would actually sit there at night and listen to them mocking us through the door, which was really unsettling.
Terrible. Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember this. There was a girl that really had a bad reaction after surgery and couldn't walk, and the nurses were ordered to help her. And she got up on her own and she fell and she broke 2 of her front teeth, on the floor. 2 of her front teeth, smashed them on the floor. And you
What's so funny? Explain, please.
Day, and you raised holy hell in a way I've never seen a doctor advocate for a patient before. It was like she, Rambo, came into that unit and was reading scripture about how patients were supposed to be treated and what you expected when you gave orders about helping.
Why is she telling the story? Because this is how Brianna Wu can't actually debate, and she's not actually intelligent. She has to rely on emotional manipulation for every conversation. So she's starting off, and she's trying to say, whoa, I respect you so much. You've done so much good in the world. You are just amazing. And that's how she starts off. Because that way, it means that if she fucks up, or if she tries to force a point through that she doesn't have enough substantiation for, or she tries to say something too confidently without backing it up, the other person is less likely to call her on it. They're less likely to dig their heels in.
Someone who was having trouble. And I remember just being in awe because, first of all, you were the first trans woman I'd ever met with FFS, so you were beautiful. And I remember thinking like how on your game you were. It was truly inspiring. Like as I went through my career and had to learn how to lead things as a woman, I thought of that moment many times.
Oh, look at this lazy fuck Liquid Sonic showing his face in chat when he hasn't finished his fucking video that he's been working on for ages. Look at this guy. Look at this guy. Embarrassing stuff. Showing your face in chat when you've been working on a video for fucking weeks. Also, guys, I'm setting up a goal. Guys, there is a super chat goal in the chat.
When it was cut off, it became sentient and slithered out of the room.
Oh, you missed it, Hickory.
True
Thank you for the
story.
$5. Thank you. Thank you for the $5. You just missed the goal, sadly, but thank you. Yeah, get to work, Sonic, for real. Get to work, man.
So when you were put in charge of WPATH, you were like my ideal person. I was so psyched for it. I saw the integrity you had in that moment, and I assumed it would be carried over to WPATH. And,
you ditched the SFO video.
I want to say this with respect, but I do have extreme concerns about the SOC 8 and what I see as a very political direction that our healthcare is taken, which I don't think is backed up by the science. And that's, Alex, you asked why I'm here today. That's why I'm here today. Like, I really believe in you, but I also think we've gotten off path. So does that make sense to you? Do you know where I'm coming from?
Sure, although,
Yo, thank you for the 5 Canadian, the Hoop Gourd. Thank you.
If you look at WPATH as a scientific document, which WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, is like any other major medical organization.
Okay, Pepsi.
Legal personnel, psychologists.
It's not the Pepsi comedy styling hour, okay?
Base of membership, but it is very much as
go do your bits on your own stream.
The AMA or the APA or other major, the Endocrine Society, American Society of Plastic Surgery. It is science driven and driven by the best available evidence. If you look at the SOC 8 compared to the SOC 7, the SOC 7 was about 65 pages. The SOC 8 is 240 something pages. And the amount of research that is presented and referenced in that is staggering. So are there holes in the evidence?
Thank you for the $5.
Mid-poster ban deterrence.
That's a good tribute to avoid a mid-poster ban. Thank you for the $5.
Or areas that are not yet completed? Sure, as there is in any field. But the intent and the...
We're the type of guy to be offered a coffee at a job interview and say, I only have a business.
Integrity of the science is there. You can kick the rugs and find, again, little omissions anywhere you look in any organization. But I actually would argue that WPATH does it rather well. And it's...
I sit there in the lobby. Anytime I'm waiting for anything, I sit there in the lobby waiting for it. And if someone that I'm not there to speak to comes up to me like, oh, do you want a drink or anything? I'm like, why are you talking to me? I just look at them. Why are you talking to me? And they'll feel awkward and leave. I just go back to sitting in silence till that shows up.
Its membership has also changed in that founded in 1979, it was largely considered a group of cisgender, mostly white Europeans, making these guidelines for the healthcare of trans persons. And over time, we now reach, there's 43 countries represented,
hey, an emoji.
More than 4,500 members. And we're increasingly diverse with more.
Yeah, didn't want to bother you. What, like you're doing right now? Dude.
Trans people now in the organization, and even some in leadership, including myself, which is a bit staggering in that WPATH had never had, since 1979, never had a woman with trans history as its president.
You were the first.
I was the first.
And you served as president from 2022 to just
2024,
recently,
2 years.
A 2-year term. And it's it's not a full-time role.
No, it's not paid. None of the positions are paid.
Really? That's very surprising.
No.
Wow. Well, thank you for doing that. I do want to take issue because I don't share your appraisal that WPATH is informed by the science in multiple areas. I think this is largely what I think the problem is. I think, Marcy, I think people like you and I are a very old phenomenon. right? Boys that desperately want to be girls. Like you can go back 4,000 years and see us, right? Like we were on Roman times, we were there, right? I think what has happened is
back to the time
case
of Jesus.
for us,
I mean, eunuchs are
100%.
There's references of eunuchs in the Bible, which are
well,
probably
we'll get
early
into that.
transpersons.
We'll get into that. But I think the science, I think the original
eunuchs.
were
Wow,
based
those are just like modern trans people when you think about it. Well, actually, all gender nonconformity throughout history is actually all the exact same thing and manifests in the exact same way for the exact same reasons. Do you guys know this? Do you guys know they had two-spirit in Native American? Do you guys know this? Do we know about this? Or you heard about this? They used to little boys in Sparta?
I think, generally speaking, the SOC, particularly since the SOC 7, has
there's references to eunuchs in the Bible
in a way that there's frankly no science to justify. I want to give you 4 examples of things I don't think the science.
When is your hair starting their own stream?
The eunuchs chapter, which I'm sure we'll get into.
It is getting rough. There's way too much at the back
here. We are taking literal teenagers who do not fit the criteria for gender dysphoria in the DSM-5, and we are giving them low dosage of testosterone, which is utterly, there's no study to show this works. There's no clinical protocol to even identify a non-binary person.
I think you can find, there's actually quite a bit of information out, and especially emerging information in a variety of countries, too, some of which have been maligned as being against this sort of care, which, in fact, from knowing people on the ground in Sweden and the UK, there's some, I would disagree.
Brianna, why don't you list the other 2?
Yeah,
and
I've got them down here, and then we'll kind of go through them, because I want to take our time and make sure.
Is it true that you tried to dye your hair like Gojo, but pussied out after the first strand? Yeah, that's exactly what happened, man. That's where the white streak came from. I actually forgot to show your edit, J. Keith. I don't know how I missed it on the subreddit. We totally forgot about this. We did not play this. Lolicon Liam Donovan. Let's see. So good. Liam, stand up! Liam, stand up! Okay.
Into each of these claims. So list the other 2, and then we'll go through.
Well, so the third one would be female to male transsexuals, which there is not the same level of evidence for people like us for. The pathology is different, the risks of hormones are different, the surgery is different, the detransition rates are different. It seems very clear to me this is a different population, and the treatments are largely conflated. And the fourth one is the spiciest, which is children. Underage transitions for minors, something that I am in favor of in some form, but I think that, clearly there have been lawsuits, including the Tennessee lawsuit, that have...
I think the laughing over Wu's, thank you for my glorious... I can't even read this, man. She had the trances for so long, she filters the fuck out of a visual presentation, and she's a psychologically repulsive person. Wow.
Felt that WPATH has not been straightforward about the science with minors.
If I could just interject one thing, though, that's very important in any discussion of this sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's very important not to inject anecdote as being a prescription.
Kuihman, when Bo Black grew his hair out, he thought everyone should think he's trans. Yeah, I also saw him on Twitter implying that he's taking HRT now as well.
For how medicine should be delivered. This is true in any
field. Great path that's taken right now.
That's especially true. So when you isolate and you pick out someone who so-called detransitions or retransitions back to their former gender, those cases are very isolated, and they're of course they've been run up the flagpole as being symbolic of the entire movement and indictment of the entire process of care. But if you look at the vast majority of individuals who have undergone treatment, including adolescents, their rates of satisfaction, psychosocial improvement.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think it needs to afford it. It's Canada, right?
Performance in school. You know, I'm on the front line. I see patients. I see these families come in, and it's really quite dramatic. So again, the isolated case reports of dissatisfaction with care, those are isolated and should be set aside. And even some who have been championed as being detransitioners don't doubt the accuracy of the diagnoses even, but that the fact that their own personal situation has changed in some way. But there's no question. I do want to agree with you that this is a very, very important age group. And and what we did for implementing puberty blockers, for example, before the onset of puberty, a lot of that was, you know, there were very limited studies, and this was mainly an extrapolate. Well, I shouldn't say mainly. There was some extrapolation from adult data that showed clear efficacy over decades, and with the presumption that if it could be instituted prior to the onset of puberty, that it made sense that it would be as efficacious. And in many studies, that actually is true. But long-term longitudinal studies of trans youth who receive blockers, you know, we have not followed them yet into adulthood, primarily because a lot of them are just coming of age.
Right. So I heard you say two things there. You were talking about the detransitioners, which are in the FTM category, and then you started talking about puberty blockers. So I want to really I think every one of these things deserves to be drilled down into rather than us kind of wandering around. So just 1 second. I would like to start by talking about the detransition rates. So
already getting pissed off and blocking the moderator. No, Brianna. Actually, you're meant to, when the moderator talks, you're meant to shut the fuck up. You're on his show, retard. Actually, I don't know if you know that.
What I heard you say, and I just want to make sure I got this, is it's your view that we would probably agree that there is a political project to amplify these stories and to put cameras in their faces and to make people think it's a crisis. But at the same time, is it your contention that there is not a problem with the rates of female to male transsexuals, particularly children, detransitioning?
There's not appreciable differences between transmasculine and transfeminine detransition rates. No, I mean there was a large.
Wow,
study.
It's almost like this is a talking point that Brianna has adopted from seeing videos on Twitter of lots of FTMs detransitioning, and she hasn't actually looked into data at all.
A combined Canadian-U.S. study, Kinnan McKinnon. It is not yet published, I don't believe, but he was the author and presented that. There were several hundred in each camp that were presented.
Yeah, I've not got, like, you know, huge, strong takes on trans stuff, to be honest. But one thing that is really fucking annoying is it is just so obvious that so many of the people that talk about it are purely talking about it for, like, some other interest they've got. Like, right-wingers will talk about it, and they'll engage with the medical conversation, but they actually just hate all of it. They actually just want all of it gone, and that's what they're working towards. But they'll engage with this, like, retarded medical conversation when they don't even believe in it. They don't even believe, even if they completely lost that medical conversation, that wouldn't have any impact on how they think about the rest of it, so it's totally irrelevant to them anyway. And then people like Brianna Wu come in, and her entire mindset is around validating her own experience and validating the experience of people who are exactly like her. And that's all she cares about. She's just trying to get that through the door. She's trying to say, oh, no, the trans stuff was great like 20 years ago when I transitioned. And, oh, all the trans people that are MTF are super normal and epic. And you know, all the FTMs are weird and detransitioning, and that's all fake. And all this sort of stuff. So the whole way, it's just about validating her own experience, making her own life better, and making life better for her little group. It's not a like like rational, enlightened engagement with the data or with the needs of all trans people in any way. And that's basically everyone that gets involved in this. I mean, this Marcy Bowers seems fine so far. I haven't heard her say anything insane yet. But yeah, just so many of the people in the conversation are just obviously there for some self-serving reason. It's just fucking nightmarish to listen to, especially Brianna Wu.
The last WPATH meeting, and it was really staggering to see how this is a trans man who was looking in at detransition rates, and they were there weren't many. Again, these numbers are usually about 1% of persons, but it was quite clear that that the factors that went into detransition decisions were complicated. Some of them were actually about 2/3 of them were actually external. So in other words, it was their acceptance in society, it was pressure from family, those sorts of things, difficulty getting employment. Those were the issues that really factored into why they decided to suspend their transition-related care.
His study, I just want to jump in, Marcy. His study puts it between 5 and 10%. Kinnan McKinnon. So just that's obviously quite different than the 1%.
I don't have the details of the study, but one of the things that I have pointed out is that one of the reasons we may be seeing more detransition now, or change, it's even change in transition, so it's a change in their gender related goals, is that for too long we as providers provided our patients a very binary model. So it was very either or. It was, if you're not male, oh, then you must be female, and if you weren't female, then you must be male. And I think that strict adherence to a binary on the part of providers also put people they painted them into gender corners that maybe they might not otherwise have chosen. In fact, that if you look at those individual stories, many of them just felt that they weren't really as, they would, if you look at a gender as a spectrum from 1 to 10, rather than everybody being 1s or 10s, there were a lot of those patients that might have felt that they were more like a 4. So having, putting that through the mill of a binary system that wants to make you either male or female, and that's it, that number needs to be parsed out. And there's no question that WPATH and many of the persons active in the field are trying to tease that out, so that we are doing a better job of identifying who does this really work for, and make sure that we're really addressing the true needs of patients and not the needs of to put it bluntly, surgeons and and care providers.
Sure. But Marcy, if I could just interject here. So two things in response to what you just said. I have a different theory about FTMs, because I think like 10 years ago, I really just assumed they were like us. Like,
my theory is it's all made up. Actually, all these nasty whore women are just making up being trans to try and steal the thing that makes me special. That's what she's going to say.
Girls that wanted to be boys from a very young age. And I think if you get out there and you really study the pathology, they're just not. They're not.
Right, there we go.
You're making such a distinction.
Hold on, I'll let you talk.
Very true. Women are just different. They can't be trans. They can't be as special as you, Brianna. Very true.
I'll let you talk.
It doesn't really fit with that. I mean, I want to hear you more. Sure. I want to hear why you think that.
Okay, she's like throwing a fucking tantrum already. Oh my God.
I think if you get out there and you really study the pathology, they're just not. They're not.
I don't understand this. You're making such a distinction.
Hold on,
like
I'll let
this.
you talk. I'll let you talk.
It doesn't really fit with that. I mean, I want to hear.
Dude, look, she's seething. You just rattled on for fucking 5 minutes, and you're fucking seething because the doctor said to you, "Hey, Brianna, that's actually just kind of wrong."
More.
Sure.
I want to hear why you think that.
Yeah, sure. So I think that the pathology is very, very different from them. I think it's understudied. I think that the vast majority of the studies that the original Benjamins were built on were on people like you and I. And I think that, respectfully, Like, look, I'm a Democrat. I vote Democrat. I worked my butt off for Kamala. But I think respectfully, WPATH is filled with people that have a very specific worldview on the left. And I think that with the best of intentions, we assume that, hold on, can I please finish? Yeah. Sure, thank you. I think with the best of intentions, we assume that the healthcare for female to males should be the exact same as male to females. And I don't think there's really strong evidence for that. Go look at the studies that y'all have. The evidence of every single part of female to male transition is less studied than we are. It's walking them down a certain path.
Let me present some evidence to just sort of get in here for 1 second. So
100%.
I mean, there is a lot of transmasculine membership. And by the way, they should be referred to as transmasculine. I would say that F to M and M to F is old terminology. So
please go ahead, Alex.
I just want to create context for this because I think the context does matter. And the CAS review is very clear on this data. And this is from England. It's harder to get data in the US. But, you know, there was from 2010 to 2021, I think it went from like 15 people in the national gender clinic in England to like 3,000. And the vast majority of those people were transmasculine. I think it was over 2/3, close to 70%.
I see where you're going.
So I think it's just relevant, just contextually, to know that again, I was just looking at a gender clinic in Oregon had a 40x increase from 2013 to 21. And the majority are transmasculine. I think that context really matters. It also, the CAS review, and happy to dispute this, uses very specific language around the nature of when the onset of the dysphoria is. And they describe in transfeminine dysphoria, generally the onset is in an early age. Transmasculine dysphoria is generally in the teenage years.
I didn't miss any freak out, did I?
To me, a difference. I don't know what that means for the actual.
Also, Brianna keeps talking about becoming a Jew on Twitter as well. She keeps entertaining the idea of fucking becoming a Jew, converting. Dude, Jews don't want you. Jews do not want you. She thinks that Jews like her because she gets slight approval from like some giga pro-Israeli like lobbyist lunatics that she interacts with at like events, because she sits there and says how she thinks the entirety of Gaza should be bulldozed, and every single Palestinian should be cleared out of there to make a parking lot for Israel, because she thinks that there's a bunch of psycho Israelis, IPAC types, that are probably bigger up. Jews Jews don't fuck with you, Wu. Jews don't fuck with you. Put her on Adam Friedland's show. Put her on the Adam Friedland show.
This is all, I can't disagree with any of what you're saying. Okay. And although I do take issue with the CAS report, which was terribly.
We can get into that. Yeah, we have time.
Politically motivated and really not a very credible piece of opinion. But it does point out, any of these things, you can learn from them. There are certain things. And one of the things that has troubled me as well is the shift that we had from what was traditionally we thought of that it was more of we saw more trans feminine persons presenting for care, and that ratio has completely flipped. We're now 2/3 of individuals presenting to gender clinics now are assigned female at birth. And I've asked different providers, pediatric specialists, Diane Ehrensaft, a very well-known psychologist, and I'm not sure I really have
a CAS report. She said a CAS report was politically motivated. There is a good argument the CAS report was politically motivated. I don't know that the conclusions were necessarily wrong. I think if you want to say the CAS report was politically motivated, I think that's a pretty easy argument to make. It was ordered by the Tory government, obviously in response to a surge in trans healthcare stuff. and the Hillary Cass person, whatever her name is, was like bouncing around America talking to a bunch of like DeSantis and shit like that just before doing it. So I mean, I can see some argument there was maybe slightly politically motivated, but you'd have to argue with the conclusions that the decisions it made.
Answer.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it is retarded to pretend that WPATH is like this perfect, free of ideology org, but the Cass report somehow, because it was like more right-leaning or something, or more trans-skeptical, that somehow that's too ideological. That's retarded, yeah.
Yet, but there's no question that society has a problem with how girls are being, what their role models are, and how we are affirming them as emerging female beings on this planet. So, and I've heard, and of course I've heard anecdotes from the individuals themselves saying that, it wasn't so much that they wanted to be men, but they were jealous of the things that they felt men could have. And
Right.
that's not really an identity issue. That is the demographic shift is one that really needs to be looked at.
I agree.
What is the body image for young girls and women as they enter puberty? I have 2 daughters myself. So in my middle daughter, who's getting married this summer in Scotland, and has become decidedly feminine, by the way. But she really didn't like puberty. When she got breasts and she had to put a shirt on, she was not happy about it. And you might even have considered her to be a bit of a tomboy. But so, and then the older daughter was ashamed of her breasts and used to walk in a way that kind of covered up her emerging breast tissue. So, and that I was so surprised by that as someone who identified as female, that wouldn't be a proud feature of who they were. But this is the issue, and this is why in any of these standards, the process has to be slowed down.
I agree.
I'm not saying that it hasn't been. Again, you have to be struck by how overwhelming the rates of success are. If you look at breast augmentation in cisgender women, you look that up sometimes. Celebrity breast, how many regret that surgery? Knee surgery, which is very difficult.
Stop. I think that's an unfair presentation. Okay, that's always gonna be awkward to talk about.
Get through has a 20%
regret
rate.
Yeah, I was really glad to be in the positive category on that.
So we want to be better about it. We want to get better about it, especially
knee surgery mentioned. Wait, knee surgery mentioned.
How many augmentation and states of success are? If you look at breast augmentation in cisgender women, you look that up sometimes. Celebrity breast, how many regret that surgery? Knee surgery, which is very difficult to get through.
Knee surgery? What?
Have that.
Rate.
Yeah, I was really glad to be in the positive category on that.
So we want to be better about it. We want to get better about it, especially in young people that have their whole lives ahead. The worst thing we can do is prescribe a therapy that they're not going to be happy with.
Knee surgery tomorrow.
So I would really appreciate like an equal chance to talk as we're doing this. That would feel fair to me. So I hear what you're saying on that. I feel like we're jumping around a bit. So I want to come back to something you touched on, because I think this is a really big point of disagreement.
Yes, Queen would be like, that's unfair. It's actually really hard not to be awkward when talking about your daughter's tits on the internet. Yes, unironically. Yes, it's going to be awkward for parents to talk about their fucking kids' puberty. Especially a, technically male parent talking about their, female child's puberty. That's especially awkward.
But I also want to make sure we give FTMs their due, because I think this needs to be radically unpacked. So, Alex, do you have any preference about which way we go with this? Would you rather go down talking about the non-binary stuff she brought up, or stay on the FTMs for now?
I think here's what I would like to do, just to pull back for a second, because I think we just got out of the gate in the weeds, and people, you both are deeply ensconced in these conversations, and I think just to frame it up for people, I think, like, for a second, and then we'll have time for both of those, and I think just in general, when thinking about the conversation around gender affirming care. And I think the conversation, there's one around kids or generally teens and adults. So I think we should just focus around, in general, be focused on the teen conversation, because I think that is the conversation.
I never like to use that word "science is settled," because that is not science is never settled. It's always evolving. But but for adults, that evidence is very strong that gender affirming care. The real issue, and this is why we're running into so much trouble, we ran into it this last political cycle, is that particularly conservative lawmakers and religious conservatives see gender as godly prescribed, assigned at birth, in a perfect binary.
Sure.
And they take a third grade biology approach to humanity. And it's never been that way. There's one in 50
My literal job is
are
stopping
considered
Republicans,
intersex.
but the political project has nothing to do with our health care. My literal
Oh my God, now she's getting pissed off.
Conservative lawmakers and religious conservatives see gender as godly prescribed, assigned at birth, in a perfect binary.
Sure.
And they take a third grade biology approach to humanity.
Okay, there are people getting triggered over that presentation, but that is essentially just true. Okay, that is essentially just true. That is basically how most retards think about gender and shit. They think it is something that is just like ordained, like you have your gender in your head. That's your gender. It's set. That's what you are. And you go through life, and that's what you are. That's how they think of it. They do think of it like a fucking retard. The average person does think about shit like a fucking retard. But I see Stylo and Napoleon acting like that's not how every fucking retard conservative and most retard libs think about this shit. Or not even libs, like most retard trans people, to be honest. That is just true. People think gender is like a fact of the matter. Like you are a man when, like, separates being male. You are a man, that's a thing about you that is the case. It's like, not.
And it's never been that way. There's one in 50
My literal job is
are
stopping
considered
Republicans,
intersex.
but the political project has nothing to do with our health care. My literal job is to stop them. This is a healthcare discussion, and it is completely exogenous.
It's so true.
We're talking about healthcare between a doctor and a patient.
Yes.
So true.
So when it comes to gender affirming care and, sort of children and teenagers and adolescents, there is the context for this WPATH standards of care moving from 6 to 7 to 8, which is really what we're talking about, right? So I think for people at home, number one, WPATH is an organization that has immense influence over what is best medical practice around the world. It is the sort of gold standard for best practice. There was a shift from 6 to 7 to a more affirmative model. And then there was a shift from 7 to 8 that did a number of things. And we will get into them. It got rid of age minimums. It got rid of what...
Okay, but TOS Farmer, that's just admitting that you're not engaging with the conversation. If your position is, all this shit about identifying doesn't exist, it's like you're just admitting that you're not engaging with the conversation. That's just you saying, I'm too fucking stupid to engage with this conversation. That's what you're saying there. If that's your position, that oh, it's just sex, and anything else doesn't exist. That's you saying, I'm too fucking retarded. I don't understand what these words mean.
I think trans sort of advocates call gatekeeping, and replaced it within a model that is called informed consent. And I think that is what we really do need to get into and break down. There are other things like eunuch as a gender and saying puberty blockers were reversible. So there's a lot, but this SOC 8 is really what governs medical care in the 24 states where this is still allowed, right? Obviously, the broader context is that the political situation when it comes to this care is deeply fraught in ways we can talk about. So I do just want to get at this concept of informed consent because I think it is the most important concept.
Middle guy looks like he's actively having bottom surgery off screen.
Over $5. Gender is real. What does that mean? What you say gender is real? What does that even mean? Gender isn't like a thing that we can see. It's an analysis. It's a mode of analysis for your internal sense of self and the way people behave in society. That's what it is. It's looking at the way someone's relationship to their sex and relationship to the sex of other people is expressed both within themselves and externally. Like it's not like quote unquote real. It's not like saying gender is real. It's not like saying race is real. Those are two quite different things. Gender it simultaneously has to be true to some extent, but also literally can't be real, But definition, it almost has to be true to some extent. Like we can just see this is just because it's almost like a frame of analysis. It that maps onto some extent. It has to it has to hold some truth because there is sex. There is a way that's expressed in society. And there is an internal relation you have with that.
Gender is real.
Thank you for the $5 shelf tide.
All of the other questions that we are getting into, right? And so SOC 8, its concept of informed consent is one of what? How
Hey, Tarly bots, you sound mentally disabled. So I'm just gonna I won't just ban you from chat immediately, but you do sound very mentally disabled. So if you say more retarded things, I will. No one cares. There's a bunch of trans activists say stupid shit. No one cares.
Let's go back a little bit. I've been a member of WPATH.
Yeah, there's a million trans activists that say a bunch of stupid shit, and there's a million right-wingers that say a bunch of stupid shit. We know. Crazy.
I have barely talked in this, Marcy. I would really love you to share with the mic a little bit.
All right, so Brianna, take informed consent away, and then you can create context.
In 2001,
so this is one of my really biggest problems with SOC 8. This has been a disaster. I think this affirmative care model has been disastrous for trans people. And I really, really want to walk through this because this is my biggest problem with it. There are a lot of states today where you can walk in and you can just sign some forms and say, I acknowledge this and get on testosterone literally that day. When I transitioned, hold on.
That's not
Marcy.
Really, they're
Marcy,
not,
I really need you to respect me and stop talking over me, please.
Whoa, Brianna.
When I transitioned 20 years ago, I went through every single one of the Benjamin standards that were written in 1998. It was not particularly difficult to go through. I went to a doctor. I had therapy for 3 months. I hit every single, it was the DSM-4 at the time. I hit every single criteria on there. Very easily got clearance for hormones. And even though I was in Oxford, Mississippi, I found an endocrinologist who was willing to work with the letter that my therapist gave me. I literally went over to the Mississippi Endocrinology Center and would read textbooks to try to figure out the dosing because my doctor had no idea back then. Then from there, I left. And my next stop was actually your clinic. And you actually required, when I got vaginoplasty from you, you required the 2 letters from that.
Gaslighting was a joke. I'm just, okay, okay. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. You sound way less retarded in this message, so you've given me, I've given me some grace. Gaslighting was a joke. I'm saying it's not inherently anti-trans or right-coded. Yeah, I'm not saying it is either. Gender isn't real. Sure. I agree with that. But saying gender isn't real Someone said basically the way that where that came from was TOS Farmer said these people think that none of the identifying stuff, quote unquote, exists. But the identifying stuff has to exist. Even for a cis person, there is a relationship that they have with their sex and an internal way that that affects their identity and an external way that's expressed. All of that happens even for the most cis person. They experience all of that. So to say gender, none of the identifying stuff exists. No, it has to. It literally, it has to some extent. It's almost like definitionally true that, yes, you do have a thought process about the way you feel about your sex. It isn't tangible or meaningfully measurable. Sure, yeah, the actual internal gender isn't meaningfully measurable. That's true, yeah.
1998 standard, one of which was just a letter written by a therapist, and another was one that cost me $1,000 to get written, actually, that was by a psychiatrist that went very deeply into my entire case history. They presented it to your clinic. These are the standards that you followed when you did my vaginoplasty. Y'all looked at this. The nurses, I remember going over them. They approved them. I wrote a check and I ran in there, and I've never had a second of regret for
Should cis women be allowed gender-affirming surgery when they think they're ugly? They already get that.
any of that. My problem is this removal of all these medical safeguards has put an avalanche of people into this system
so
that
there's
I
still
think
safeguards.
are not served.
There are still safeguards.
Not
so
served.
You just can't state
Alex, can
misinformation.
I please, Alex?
Yeah, no, you need to be able to finish, Brianna.
Okay, I'm fine, but it's taken. There's a lot there, and I need to respond at some point.
So what I was saying is, I think the problem is today, you have a lot of people that are going and they're being rushed through this system. And I think you have healthcare providers that are undereducated on the dynamics of this, particularly with autism, particularly with comorbidities. And I think the classical cases like you and I think we are very clearly.
Okay. So they did say they were limiting this conversation to just teenagers, right? Am I going crazy? I'm pretty sure they said that. I don't think teenagers just walk in and get hormones. I know it's incredibly easy for adults to get hormones. But I don't know that teenagers just walk in and get them. I think that's
responding to the medication. I think the truth is, in 2025, this affirmative access model has allowed all kinds of people to go in and start HRT. We have non-binary people. There's not even a way to define non-binary people clinically. It's just top to bottom. It is fetishistic cross-dressers, which were very explicitly cut out of the.
Yeah, for teenagers and kids, I agree that there should be a lot of restrictions. I'm like, honestly, like for adults, it like ultimately just feels like a cosmetic surgery to me, you know? Like if you want to go fucking chop your body up and become a woman, as long as, you know, we don't have some reason to think that your like agency is totally fucked. I mean, if you're paying for it, fuck it, you know?
1998 standards. We have them coming through. Healthcare providers are not educated on this, and they're moving down a medicalized pathway. And I think a really big problem why you're seeing this maladjusted behavior in the trans community is it's a population of people that are not served by our healthcare mercy. You and I really responded to this because we were the thing in the medical textbook. But when you lower these...
They want the government to pay an insurance. Yeah, I think there could be arguments to put it on healthcare. But it would have to just be, like, super controlled. You know, you would have to know that this person actually has, like, a form of gender dysphoria that would be in some way alleviated or improved. You know, what I say has gender dysphoria. Having gender dysphoria isn't even really a thing. Mental illnesses are all fake anyway, but you know what I mean. You know, we have to be relatively certain that this is going to have some kind of meaningful impact. Well, how do you measure any intervention, right, Stylo, with healthcare, mental health care? Like, it's all based on internal state of mind and shit, right? That you just have to see, like, track traits and see how interventions work for people with those certain traits over time. See what the best solution is. But obviously, if there was a, let's say it actually was the case that there's like a group of trans people, let's say not even all trans people, like 50% of MTFs or 30% of MTFs have like a 40% suicide rate normally. But you can half the suicide rate by transitioning them. Like, would that be worth putting on healthcare? Probably, right? It's probably worth putting on healthcare if you could half their suicide rate. And that was not proven, because it can't like prove it, but we had good evidence to suggest that was the case. But the thing is, that isn't that good evidence, and I don't know that all trans people are the same, or that transitioning is right for all trans people. It feels like there's like one pathway that all of them go down, where it's just like people debate all the suicide rate stuff and the life improvements.
Safeguards this severely. You have people that are being rushed through this, and they're not adjusting like you and I are. They're not getting jobs. They're not integrating. They're not making it to the other side. Like, anyone can look at the trans community today and see this.
Well, let's start with that last point.
Please.
Disinformation, misinformation that continues to be uttered about the trans community, the hatred, frankly, that's been fomented by not only politically, but societally towards trans people as a result of fear and misinformation, some of which you're actually repeating in some of the things you had to say. It's true. There still are letters required. The standards of steer are
not
still
universally.
Yes, they are required for bottom surgery. Absolutely, they are required.
Okay, so but they're not required for hormones and puberty blockers.
They're not required for hormones.
And for the vast
facial
majority
surgery.
of gender
For
affirming
facial
cases.
surgery,
right.
No. But they aren't required for cisgender people of the same age, and that was the point. It was about fairness.
It was my brother. I'm not crazy up on like the science of it, but my understanding is the female male brain thing isn't like, that's not quite what it's portrayed as. Is my understanding. My loose understanding is it's not quite what it's portrayed as. That it's not very explanatory. So yeah.
Came from the trans community. These were directives that were insisted upon by members of the trans community who were sick of the gatekeeping. Now, not all of, very little of what they would have liked. They would have ideally liked a fully informed consent model for care, and that is not what we have. WPATH is like a cruise ship. It moves much too slowly for the likes of people. When we make a turn in direction, it's much too slow for the majority, for many of the people who on the left, let's say. We do so with evidence, and we do so with a lot of trepidation and thoughtfulness. Now,
what is the evidence, Marcy? I because you referred to earlier anecdotally, and
evidence.
Yes, because I really did a lot of research, and
evidence-based care is taking it's not just the science, but it's also scientific consensus. So when evidence was lacking, we did a process called the Delphi process. Now, again, I wish I would have had a chance to have. I didn't know this was a debate about the standards of care. So pardon me, I'm just an author on one chapter, the surgery chapter. Each had a subsection and chapter leads, and then members of the scientific community who provided input into those chapters and reviewed the literature. And you can look at every chapter. Each chapter has, many of them have hundreds of references listed of the available science.
I did look at the studies in the standards of care, and we don't have to go super deep in Brianna. You can go way in here. I don't think a lot of medicine has weak evidence base. So I'm not saying because there is a weak evidence base that we should not be having conversations about the most compassionate medical care for kids with dysphoria. Before we get to SOC8, because this is when I got really interested.
Well, I haven't even had a chance to answer the other 5 things that Brianna that I had issue with. So
okay, so we can put a pin in it. I just do want to,
dude, that's so based. Sorry, wait a moment. Brianna said 5 other things that were really fucking annoying. So can I just run through all those first?
Make sure we get to the evidence base, because
let's talk about
it a number of times.
So evidence-based medicine, the level of evidence is this lofty goal of having a
I've heard this goes totally off the rails,
placebo-controlled process, which in areas that where the outcome is disastrous to not treat. Let's say diabetes. If you put everything through, diabetes has low level of evidence for the ability. Why? Because you would never put a diabetic through non-treatment. You would never put them through a randomized blinded control when you have a therapy, when you know insulin is beneficial. You would never take someone with cancer and put them through a placebo control. So this right away drops their level of evidence. And this is a large part of medicine is not guided by high levels of evidence. So when you have a population that is potentially suicidal, has major mental health issues, you don't put them through randomized double-blind control studies. However, you do take time. You slow things down. And the therapists that I know and that I work with, they put patients through time. This takes time.
Isn't that anecdotal?
This idea of these pop-up clinics. Now, some of that happened. The pandemic conspired in some of that patients weren't able to access.
So okay, so she's saying they do take time, but it's like what's like the data on that, right? Because I felt like this is my probably one of my bigger sticking points with the trans healthcare stuff is that it does sort of sound like when I ever hear a about guidelines or about how they're talking about these things should be treated, it always sounds like basically it is just that if the person keeps saying they want to transition, they'll get pushed down that pipeline without like scrutiny. That seems to be how the mindset is. But I don't know if that's true, if that's borne out in the data. Like her just saying, no, therapists wait. So okay, well, do they? Do they actually? Like, how do I know that?
Care, we already know that access to gender-affirming care was abysmal, and that was well before we ever got into the political attacks that began in the 2020s. And we know that lack of access to care increases suicidality and stress on individuals. When you have to travel 300 miles to access gender-affirming care, it's very, very frustrating and very difficult. So people began to pop up their the advent of online medicine, pop-up clinics run by trans people, where basically it was almost.
Australia is a very effective model. After 18, you can do what you want with these very quickly. What, like on government dollar, on government money? I don't care if you can do what you want as an adult on your own money. You can chop yourself up as much as you want on your own money as an adult.
Vending machine-like availability. That
top surgery. I don't. Top surgery is a difficult one because top surgery. I mean, probably not for trans stuff. Probably shouldn't be. I don't know though, because it's difficult. Because people just get breast reductions and shit for fucking back pain and shit, don't they? That shit should be illegal. So true, Stylo.
That was clearly wrong, and that is not laid out in the standards of care. That is not how care is meant to be delivered. So,
Marcy,
it is meant to have a complete psychosocial.
Please let me talk, girl. Please.
Dude, oh my god, dude, Brianna's spurging out. She's got to run down the list of shit you got wrong, Brianna. Give her the moment. Shut up.
Let me talk some.
Are you going to let me finish once?
We can put a clock up, girl.
Let me just finish one thought. Brianna, please. I didn't know I was going to be attacked. I'm sorry.
You're not being attacked. We're trying to talk policy. We're trying to talk policy.
Not saying it's common, but I saw exactly happening with no doctor involvement in secret parents, early teen. It's at least not a myth. I don't think anyone's saying that it just like never happened. Well, I'm not saying any of that. I'm sure some retarded parents activists say. I don't think anyone's saying that it never happens. It's just like I would like to see, what's the rate of this stuff? Yeah, there's always like shit doctors that do crazy stuff. Like, what's the rate of it? Is it policy to allow that sort of thing? Like,
I have to be honest. The WPATH standards of care and how they are delivered by the professionals that I work with, the first thing that is administered is a complete psychosocial evaluation. That whether you're an adolescent, whether you're an adult, that is first and foremost. No one goes in, no one is supposed to go in and walk out with a prescription for hormones. That is not how the standards of care were meant to be delivered. Let me just talk about
the reality of how they're being delivered.
Sorry?
Wu crashing out due to her lack of access to a mute button this time.
Thank you for the $5. Very true.
Many places you can go in. Free Press had a fantastic... Sure. Barry Weiss had a fantastic article at Free Press about how Planned Parenthood is...
I'm sorry, that's not a credible journalist.
She had a really... We're talking healthcare policy, not personal attacks.
It's not a credible
journalist. She had a really good
journalist.
article that was deeply researched about how Planned Parenthood has become one of the top providers of testosterone in the entire...
The right has hated Planned Parenthood.
Mercy,
forever.
Please, girl, please.
Well, you have to let me respond. If this is a conversation is free-flowing. That means it goes back and forth.
Okay, well, I'll just talk
Barry Weiss runs a slop grifting university.
over you when you keep monologuing.
Just saying that's not a credible journalist isn't really engaging, but like also I don't trust Brianna Wu's ability to select or vet information, and I also think Brianna would just shill any other grifter if they vaguely agreed with her. So I don't know. I don't really know where to draw a conclusion on that. I can't be fucked to look into it.
How's that?
Kuihman, when you die, will you go to Snow Bunny Heaven?
No, thank you for the £5. Thank you, Galaxy Dawn.
All right, hey, we're doing okay. Brianna, finish your thought. We're working through this. Thank you.
Yeah, we're trying to.
We're trying.
There was a great article about how
Planned
Parenthood is one of the top providers of testosterone in the entire country. It's got plenty of anecdotes in there about affirmative access, how someone walks in, signs a form, walks out on testosterone. I don't have to tell you, Marcy, testosterone is not the same as estrogen. You can end up incontinent in your 20s because your bladder will not work anymore. So you're wearing adult diapers. You can have sepsis. Your uterus confused together. That's 100% true.
Okay,
anyone can fact check this.
I'm sorry.
100%.
That is disinformation.
So what's this?
Testosterone signs a form, walks out on testosterone. I don't have to tell you, Marcy, testosterone is not the same as estrogen. You can end up incontinent in your 20s because your bladder will not work anymore. So you're wearing adult diapers. You can have sepsis.
All right.
Your uterus confused together. That's 100% true.
Okay.
Anyone can fact check this.
I'm sorry.
100%.
That is disinformation.
The incontinence isn't true. You don't think people are incontinent if they go on testosterone.
Absolutely not. Unequivocally.
What did McMahon say about it in the video? What is this about? Is this just like... Is it like a side effect that's like rare? It's linked to estrogen. Oh, so both of them do it, and it's just like a rare side effect, or like a side effect that could possibly happen. But Brianna acts like it's just a testosterone thing. McMahon says it's linked to estrogen, not testosterone. Yeah, I mean, I think my suspicions are right here, and that Brianna just wants to protect her own group and throw other groups under the bus. But that's been known. That's been known.
Wow.
Okay.
So, all right, let's stay here for a second.
Hold on.
So, well, FTMs are like, MTFs are like really normal, and AGP MTFs are actually really normal and epic, and FTMs are an abomination, and they piss themselves.
This is Alex.
I've lived
this is
with
not
two
fair
trans
because
men.
I don't
Believe
have
me,
any time to
incontinence is
talk.
not the issue.
It's fundamentally
testosterone.
not fair.
Hormones are
Brianna,
remarkably safe. So let's not let this
I
devolve.
agree. Estrogen is great.
Let's not let this
but there are
devolve into
different risk
disinformation, or
factors.
I'm
They're
just not going to be
different.
able to
It's not
continue.
disinformation. There are different risk factors for estrogen versus testosterone. That's just true. There's a lot of differences. You don't get the euphoria if you go on testosterone and estrogen rather, as opposed to testosterone. That gives you this high, which is why it's a controlled substance.
Oh, come on.
There are fundamental differences between them.
So let's just finish with informed consent.
Yeah, you need to stick to a medically accepted argument, though, please.
We'll start with Brianna here. How do you think about the concept of informed consent when we're referring to teenagers and younger children?
Everyone. Yeah, I really benefited from going through the standards of care. 100% I did. Marcy, I was actually like at the edge of homelessness when you did my vaginoplasty. I was immediately disowned the second I came out. It was the worst time in my life economically was when I was in Colorado. I was literally working at GameStop, saving up enough to do your surgery. And like the standards of care, the fact that when I was doing all my letters, it really gave me time to prepare and to have a plan in place in case my parents disowned me, because they did. It let me really think through the consequences of that action. It allowed me to work with my university. I was actually the first student at the University of Mississippi to transition, which I'm very proud of. So I've heard this argument over and over again from the trans community that like the standards of care are like this oppression. And I truly have never been able to understand why. I transitioned in Mississippi, and I had no issues whatsoever. And it's like the DSM standards were much higher in the DSM-4.
This is just pure. Okay, now this is like pure anecdote. This is like, well, I never had a problem. It's okay. That's not really how we answer these questions, Brianna.
As opposed to the DSM-5, you've got to have 2 of those 6 criterias. And you're telling me someone can't go talk to a therapist for 3 months before like changing their endocrine system forever? 2 out of 6? It's just insane to me. So I think we are not serving people by not giving them a pathway to go down. And just one more thing. Something I've noticed is the trans community is so radically different today than 20 years ago. And I think one of the problems is that the standards of care, go read the ones from 1998, they're really smart in the sense that every step socializes you into the next one. It's like, I had gender dysphoria. I wanted to do this, so I went to a therapist. I did that. It opened up a door. I wanted to get hormones. Went talked to a doctor, it opened up a door. Then I had to go hold a job for a year. I had to go out in the real world. I couldn't just sit at home on the computer. It opened up a door. It forced me to go learn some stuff about how to interact with the world as a woman, which I'm going to tell you, this is hard to learn. And
okay, but wait. So Brianna was saying that you have to hold a job for a year. That's like a requirement to transition as an adult on your own money. I'm sorry, I mean, I just thought maybe I'm just too much of a fucking libertarian. Maybe that's the issue I'm finding here. Maybe I am just like some retarded libertarian. I just feels like why the fuck why is there a restriction? If an adult wants to take this fucking retarded estrogen shit, then fucking, as long as it's not like totally insane. Why the fuck are you putting like these retarded criteria on it? Like, I get the idea is like to make sure the transition goes right. That's probably best practice to do this sort of stuff. But like, is that fucking? It's their decision. No, I mean it's fucking adult. Thank you for the membership shelter. Thank you, huge appreciate it. Thank you.
You know, then I went and got vaginoplasty. Every step.
Like, yeah, like, would we say, like, if a woman wants fucking a breast job, like a fucking boob job, breast enlargement, whatever, do we go, you've got to hold down a job for a year? Like, I just don't understand what standard we're setting it. It's like retarded.
led into the next one and gave me a way to
no trophy wife balloon tits,
an integrated, normal, productive member of society that could hold a job. And I don't see this today. And I really think that the destruction of these medical safeguards are really not serving trans
First
people.
of all,
I
you're
think
going
it's
to
why
have to
a lot of the maladaptive behavior
saying
comes
destruction
from.
medical safeguards, because that is,
They've
there are still
absolutely been
letters
destroyed,
required.
Marcy.
The thing that has been eliminated is this idea of living in a, we used to call it a real life experience,
Yeah.
or a desired gender role.
Yes.
I still recommend that for my patients.
You should.
Every patient, that's one of the questions we ask. And I'm frankly alarmed if they have. Fortunately, we have a long wait list, so patients are in general required to have some sort of employment. And
okay, so here's the thing: is that it's okay. I'm just thinking through this a moment. Even from so I just approach from like libertarian, like why the fuck you'd have to jump through all these hoops to get something you're paying for? It's your decision. But even looking at it from like a healthcare perspective, sometimes time is quite important in an intervention. And with trans stuff, if someone's transitioning, there can be even, the end result is usually not amazing anyway. But the worst part is the middle phase, right? Where they're moving away from being one gender and then moving into being another gender. That's a very strange looking, awkward, probably very, I would imagine, dysphoric, rough time, I would imagine. And having these, not arbitrary, but extended periods of like, for when an adult has to like live as like this type of person and just like delaying it for the reason of like, oh, you have to be sure, you have to be sure. It's like, well, yeah, they should be sure, but the constant delaying could cause problems in the treatment. Like that could make the treatment worse, not as effective for the people who are sure. So there should probably be some flexibility at least in that range, right? Just being like, oh, well, now you've started hormones, you got to work a job for a year. So what, you got to work or before you start hormones, you got to work a job for a year. So you got to socially live as a woman without hormones or whatever this is in a job for a year before you can get the next step. Like that seems like an insane hurdle to throw into stuff like treatment cases where it might not be needed. Like that just seems stupid. Like even as someone that is skeptical on a lot of the trans stuff, I'm libertarian when it comes to adults, but with the actual healthcare stuff, I'm like a little bit skeptical of the data and stuff. Even as someone who's like skeptical of the data and the healthcare arguments around it, that's like, that just seems like a retarded thing that seems like a retarded kind of hurdle that does impact the efficacy of the treatment in a lot of cases. So there's got to be better vetting processes and like methods of figuring out what's going on with a patient other than, making them wait a year for the next part of their treatment while they prove they can work a job like a fucking, like a child.
They generally do when they come as far as surgery. They are, for the most part, employed, fortunately, these days. Moving as the, what would we say, the left wing of the trans community would have is towards an informed consent model. I think, I mean, I'm going to sort through all the disinformation you said and pick out what I can agree with.
It's not disinformation, Marcy. It's not.
It's disinformation, but it's flat out disinformation.
You've put all kinds of bullshit out.
Just let me speak?
No, it's like you cut me off. You're just completely lying at the beginning of this about the high standards of the standards of care. So if you want to talk disinformation, we can do this.
Brianna.
Let's finish, Marcy. Finish
there
your
is
response.
Still letters that are required.
There are letters that are required. You're changing the subject. They've been eliminated for facial feminism.
Yeah, so the point that she's making here is it's like, yes, we've gotten rid of these hurdles that are built into the process, right? You don't have to work a job for a year. but you still have to see specialists, see psychiatrists and stuff like this, and have letters of referral sent and all this sort of thing. There are still professionals that have to say, okay, I am putting my name next to this and saying everything's okay here, right? I think that's reasonable. I think that's a reasonable response.
Feminization surgery
it is not
and
wholesale
and it's been completely removed for HRT. That's what we're talking about. So stop bullshitting everyone.
You're yelling. You're yelling.
All right.
I'm yelling because you're being dishonest.
Let me just ask a question to both of you, because
my expertise is in surgery. It's not in hormones. It's not. But
how does a
Brianna opened this, by the way, started with oh, can we just assume that both of us are here with good intentions? Can we just assume both of us are here with good intentions? You're being dishonest. You're being dishonest.
Patient, let's say a 14-year-old, how do they give informed consent? That is a question that comes up in the critiques of SOC8 all the time. It's like, how does a child who is
they are not emancipated adults. So in other words, they are not themselves able to give informed consent. They have to have a parent, at least preferably two parents, but at least one parent, and they must sign for that individual.
Do the children, do you think, have a sense of what the complications could be down? Because
this is important what you're getting at.
Yeah, you've talked about this and sort of offered some warnings. So I think it's worth putting those out there.
Yeah, that's a very important point. And how do we say to an 11 or 12-year-old, how do you present the future in a way that can account for what they may face in the future, whether it's the effects of hormones, life in the future, getting jobs, surgery complications that are sometimes years.
Roll fireplace versus fake flowers.
How do you?
Marcy won.
This has to be very, very thoughtfully delivered.
It is just like, dude, Brianna's getting like room mogged here, hard. Look, this is like very tasteful. It's like your grandparents' house, real fireplace. This glass display cabinet, TV above the fireplace. And then Brianna's just like tacky neon sign, shitty faux leather sofa, fake flowers that look like they're from like a fucking kindergarten or something, like framed movie posters.
Very honestly delivered when that process is initiated. But the question is, and this is where people have come into doubt, is that how can someone have agency over their own gender identity at that age when adolescents change their mind about all sorts of things in their lives? And all I can say, and this is the
I think Brianna said she's against kids doing DIY. She's against kids doing DIY, but she's fine with adults doing DIY. I think that's what the conversation was.
But all you can say is that gender identity is different, and that gender identity is established by the age of 4, 5, 6 years old in most cases. But what I do find troubling is that more and more adolescents are presenting not with a history all the way back to childhood, but coming de novo in their teen years. And this gets back at that cohort. How many, and again, Brie, you raised the issue of trans masculine persons suddenly assigned female at birth, now identifying or saying they identify as male. How do you rationalize that dramatic increase? And then how do you sort out who is a candidate that really fits the criteria and who doesn't?
I fully agree. I think so.
But
Marcy,
that isn't a failure of WPATH. That is a demographic.
I suspect we're going to have a lot of agreement.
Can you just let me finish this?
Well, sure. I was going to agree with you, but
how do you analyze that demographic?
Well, can you stop agreeing for a moment? Let her finish, maybe.
That changing demographic, and how do you put it through?
Dude, we get so salty. It's actually say the moment she's told she like can't speak for just a second. It's like she's so fucking. Just like, what even is it? Like narcissistic? Just like has to be the one talking, has to be the star of the show all the time.
So I hear what you're saying. And this is where I really feel like WPATH is jeopardizing those children.
Okay, stop attacking WPATH, because WPATH is on the side of trans persons. We're not recruiting people. We're not a machine. Stop attacking WPATH.
Let me finish my point, please. I will attack WPATH today, and you can stay on the call
we have
and hear what I have to say.
Well, let's make the argument.
Jesus. Like, what's the point? Like, Brianna is just looking for reactionary points here, no? Yeah, I am going to attack WPATH. Ooh, why? Why? Obviously, your doctor, the one that did your chop job, literally is the head of WPATH. Why are you attacking? Why don't you just have a rational conversation, like a calm, rational conversation? Why do you feel the need to attack, to get angry? You know, just because you're being told you're wrong?
The substantive argument that underlies
Alex, you have to let me finish, man.
Okay.
Come on.
Yeah,
this is not fair.
Your thing.
This is absolutely not fair. God, I can't remember what I'm saying because it keeps going off course. So this is the problem. I think that when we started doing the Dutch protocol, Marcy, I think you and I've actually never read your story of what it was like for you as a child. I have the typical horror story for someone like new at 5, 6, deep dysphoria, depression, like suicidal ideation, poor development, all that stuff. Like I had the case as bad as you can have. So it's not like my empathy doesn't...
Woo Creed. Yes, I'm chopped. Yes, I'm broke. Yes, my vibe is off-putting. Yes, I'm low-key a bum.
...doesn't really pour out for these kids. And I know kids. I have kids that are very close to my life that have gotten this treatment, and I've seen them go from broken to like lovely young girls that do not have the damage that I had. And it's honestly inspirational. What my problem is I think WPATH has had a role in, frankly, misleading the public about what we knew about the science, as is evidenced by this Tennessee case, and has not been straight with parents or the public about what we know. And I think the removal of the age restrictions, which there was a lawsuit about, I don't have to tell you this.
The age restrictions were it was
this
actually...
role.
We'll come back to age restrictions.
The role that WPATH played in not being straight with people, not being straight with parents about what we knew about the risks for these different cohorts, particularly female to males and non-binary people, I think has jeopardized everyone's health care. Because it's very clear, if you look at this entire cohort, they're not transitioning and acclimating particularly well. So I think, particularly with children, it is so critical that we are straightforward with parents about what we know and don't know, which is why this Tennessee, what came out in the discovery there about the lack of evidence at WPATH for these policy changes, and your role in it was so disturbing.
WPATH went, the standards of care went from about 65 pages at version 7 to over 240 pages in the latest. And that was massive increase in the amount of literature and science that was referenced. It was an unprecedented document. WPATH has been about as clear as it can. It is accessible online to anyone without any password. Any member of the public can go and access the standards of care anytime they'd like to. WPATH has more than 45 countries represented. Anyone with any sort of professional degree is welcome to join. I don't know how much more transparency we can offer. We have been, it's...
Well, I mean, wait, why did she scoff at that? Why did she scoff at that? I don't understand. Wait, that sounds reasonable. We allow pretty much anyone who wants to join, as long as they've got some kind of credentials to join. Or more, how can we be more transparent? That sounds reasonable. Wait, have you not got? Is there a rebuttal to that? Is there a reason why they're not transparent? Do you have anything? Like,
it's a pretty stand-up organization. 3 major medical organizations: the AMA, the APE, the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, and the American Academy of Pediatrics all endorse gender-affirming care in much the same way that WPATH does, as does the Endocrine Society. And some of these are international organizations or stand-up American with tens of thousands of members. And they're looking at the same evidence that you're apparently not looking at. And
the evidence, the way WPATH works is the Delphi approach, which is bringing these people in.
You're going to go down the path.
There's not studies you're pointing to. There's not studies. It's the Delphi approach. Let's just be straight about that.
The Delphi approach was employed where sufficient evidence wasn't there, and then it was a matter of getting professional consensus.
What is the Delphi approach? I missed this. Brianna,
the Delphi process is, again, where we're
try to let Brianna get in there, but
no, that's okay.
All right,
let Marcy talk all she wants.
Dude, just absolutely ego, just so bruised. Ego, just so bruised. Not been the star of the show for 5 minutes, seething because the moderator wants to let Marcy talk.
My job for me.
You've said 2/3 of what we've had to say on this conversation, so it's a little hard to tolerate because I'm still back on my list of things that I want to answer earlier in the talking about the disinformation.
We'll put a pin
scaring
in this
people
after
about
the
testosterone and fetishistic cross-dressers getting care. I mean, I'm still stunned by that, Brianna, that you could actually. You know, you're just trying to.
I don't think it serves. You can go back to.
She's sparking so hard. Just literally chill for 2 seconds. What's the problem?
You can go back to the standards from the 60s. It will show that they are not. Can you just define the
Delphi approach? Because I just don't know what it is.
The Delphi approach. Now, again, I was not a chapter lead. I was merely an author in the surgery subsection, but the Delphi process is a consensus-based model where professionals in the field, as part of getting evidence-based medicine, it isn't just the science, it isn't just research that's published. So where there isn't published research to support an opinion, members, professionals working in that field are asked the question, and a significant majority are required to vote in favor of that recommendation in order for it to be printed.
Brianna, what do you think of the evidence base that supports SOC8? So Marcy, you talked about 200 pages. Like, have you evaluated that, and what do you think of it?
Well, I think the reason it's so expanded is because they've introduced all this new stuff into it, all these new categories. There's chapters in there. It's not as long as I would like on non-binary people, but you've got the whole famous eunuch chapter. Congrats on that.
What's wrong with that? The reason it was included, I didn't have anything to do with adding that, but let me talk about the history of eunuch.
What, dude? Let her fucking talk. Brianna literally can't. Brianna, bring something up. She wants to respond. Brianna's like, no, you can't just talk.
Next,
what?
Can we?
Let her finish on evidence, but I am intrigued by eunuchs. I am incredibly intrigued by the history of eunuchs.
That's
interesting.
I want to
strange way of phrasing that.
This is my problem, Alex.
Cool, man. Good stuff.
Let me give you a really quick story of what
I am intrigued by eunuchs.
This entire
dude.
Research and care, what it is.
Child logic fan, I guess.
When the DSM-5 came out, I was really, really surprised that we changed the standards from female to males and males to females to include all this non-binary stuff. And I was like, gosh, they must have done some study to justify this, to find out, to like medically justify non-binary people and show that this care helps them. And what actually happened is they sat around, these experts, and they said, well, it's just really hard for therapists to put people in these categories. So we don't really know that this is a thing. We don't really know that this helps them, but we'll just let the people do it.
Where do you come up with this?
This is like just such retarded framing. Even I can see how retarded this framing is. Yeah. No mental illnesses are like an actual thing. Yeah, they're not. It's not a box you can put people in. It's like a grouping of traits that a certain amount of people display that you see, oh, there's some of those, they've got some of that and some of that and some of that. Like, oh yeah, they're probably sort of like that kind of person. Yeah, it's never a box that you can just put people in. That is a stupid way of viewing, like, gender, mental illnesses, Like that is very low IQ. Yeah, Brianna.
WPATH, are you?
I'll 100% show it to you. I'll 100% show it to you, Marcy. I'm going to finish my point.
Sorry, this is goofiness. Let's just...
No way your doctor calling you goofy.
Come up with this. You're not a member of WPATH, are you?
I'll 100% show it to you. I'll 100% show it to you, Marcy. I'm going to finish my point.
Sorry, this is goofiness. Let's let you...
This is the standard.
If you can't be sensible,
Marcy,
you need to be sensible, or I'm not.
Dude, I mean, it is kind of true that Brianna is just like totally retarded here. Yeah. The idea that it's like the gender dysphoria is just like this thing that you can like find and measure and then assign to people and say, oh no, you have that, you have it. Yeah, it doesn't really work. That is like retarded. That's like a very retarded view of how mental illnesses work.
Not going to stay here and listen.
I looked into it. So
Thank you.
let Brianna finish, and I will just try to summarize as best.
There is a memo you can see out there justifying this change. It was done. It was by everyone that wrote that chapter in there. This is the general problem.
Where would you get a memo?
Is we're not doing studies. The problem with the Delphi approach here is we're making all this policy and saying, well, we're the experts and we're just voting and we're saying this is best for people based on like what we have here.
It's based on clinical experience, which is important. Not everything is written in a scientific chapter.
The membership of WPATH is filled with a very specific cohort. So we're telling people that we have scientific evidence for all of this stuff, as in studies justifying certain courses of treatment, and it does not exist. These studies for trans people are garbage, Marcy. You know it's garbage, and if they weren't garbage, you would reference them.
The amount of insult, let's see, you called WPATH garbage.
I said the studies were garbage.
You said I was dishonest. What else do you want to say?
You're being dishonest today.
Okay.
Yeah, she can't even stick to one talking point. Like, are we talking about the Delphi approach? That's where it started, was on the Delphi approach. Now she's saying the studies suck too. Okay, yeah, I agree. The studies probably do suck. Trans healthcare is probably a very difficult thing to study, a very new thing. And I don't expect there's a lot of money in it, right? I don't expect there's a whole lot of like, it's not like fucking oil or something, you know. There's some things that people, a lot of interests have a stake in investigating. There are other things that not a lot of interests have a stake in investigating. Trans healthcare seems like something there's not a lot of reason to investigate for a lot of people, obviously. So yeah, I agree the studies suck. But what, does that mean you just do nothing? Like, adults just can't get this treatment that they want because you don't think the studies are good enough? Like, no, if they're paying for it, ultimately they should be able to get it. As long as it's within reason. And then it's a completely separate issue to the Delphi approach, which isn't about studies. That's about doing rounds of, like, questionnaires and stuff like that, and panels with experts talking about what they've seen from practice and stuff like this. So that's a completely separate thing. That's a completely different thing. And that has nothing to do with how good the studies are.
The studies are what they are. They go into peer-reviewed journals.
Do you really think trans healthcare studies are
where
good?
There is not peer-reviewed evidence in journals? The Delphi process is a process where clinicians, people with experience in the field, experience about people who are living their lives in possibly a non-binary way, since you brought that chapter up, and they're dictating to clinicians who have been thinking of things in a binary way. Maybe we need to expand our treatment protocols and be less rigid about how they are defined.
So
this is important because this was identified by detransitioners in the large Kinnan-McKinnon study. This was the single most important point that came out of that study.
There's no health. I want to do those studies. If it helps them, we should do it.
They're studied. Look at
so
Kinnan-McKinnon.
Let me identify what the studies are in essence. I didn't read all 200 pages, but I went through the studies. Okay. So there is the Delphi approach, which is not peer-reviewed research. There were 3 peer-reviewed research studies referenced. Okay. And this is for SOC8.
Not the whole, was the whole document? That's not true.
Specifically in support of gender-affirming care. Specific for gender-affirming care.
There's decades of research. There are longitudinal studies looking at. You're talking about prospective studies?
I'm talking about the one.
No, does this guy not even know what he's talking about either?
That I.
In other words, the ones that are done before the care is delivered. Prospective studies are difficult to organize in this area of medicine. But go ahead.
There's the Dutch protocol, which is real research and has been complicated, but there's a reference to that. There is another one around hormones with 1 year of follow-up and saw modest support around.
You're talking, this is about treatment in adolescence, of course, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. For adolescents. Yeah. And then there was another protocol that didn't have results. What I'm trying to get at and understand just personally, and as you said, and you said this, it's difficult to do good peer-reviewed research into gender-affirming care for adolescents. In particular, I think
this moderator sucks. I'm glad this guy's channel's going fucking nowhere. I'm glad this guy's channel is going fucking nowhere fast. This moderator sucks. He's got some questions that he wants answered here. Bro, you should have been trying to get the conversation back on track like 30 minutes ago. Why don't you listen for what disagreement they're actually having and try to like keep them on it until they resolve it. So letting the conversation go everywhere and then in the last 30 minutes turn around and go, oh no, actually I've got some questions I want answered. You fucking retard. What terrible moderation.
Really do it well. You need to, follow on, you need to follow people for 15 to 20 years through their full
long-term studies.
Fertility and understand like, how do they feel about various side effects when they're 35. So it's very hard to do this research. Yeah. I think that having done a deep dive here, my understanding is that the actual peer-reviewed research that supports gender-affirming care is
for minors. Please say
for minors. Yes, for minors is not great. However, it's not.
But yet, but there's decades of experience from adults that is
correct,
supportive.
Which is different. And that's okay.
They may be different populations.
Right. So they keep trying to conflate. Like they're acting as though they talk. Brianna and this guy talk as though they're talking about all trans healthcare. But then when they go back to say, oh, well, there's no evidence for this. There's no evidence for this. They're only talking about studies on teenagers. They already said there's no studies on teenagers. They keep saying that. But then when they talk, they're talking about all healthcare, all trans healthcare. But they're not. They're only citing stuff for teenagers. And they're saying, like, basically, oh, there's only 3 studies on this. There's only 3 studies. Well, there's way more than 3 studies on trans healthcare. There's only 3 studies on teenagers that are cited on the WPATH. Yeah, I'm sure there's not a whole lot of research on trans teenagers right now. They probably don't have a lot to cite. That hasn't been happening for very fucking long.
I mean, Brianna brought this out. This is an important point that she did bring out, is that this demographic, especially this changing demographic in adolescence, it's a concern.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about a wider problem with these studies, Morrissey, because let's really be honest here.
There's a limited number, but they still are in generally supportive.
This is my problem with these studies. And I urge people to just go look at any random chapter of SOC8, go look at the studies that they cite, go look at trans healthcare studies in general. You can actually sit down and read them because there's not that many of them. And this is my problem.
There's a lot of research, pages and pages after each chapter.
Marcy, they tend to conflate a whole bunch of different cohorts together. So they put all of us into this giant...
You can actually learn everything about trans healthcare in an afternoon. Dude, Brianna, this is so embarrassing.
Soup. So, for instance, she mentioned knee surgery. It's a surgery I've had, meniscus repair surgery for running. One of the first things they did when they developed...
who needs to be an MD? Who needs a degree? Who needs to go to medical school?
surgery was they went through and really tightly defined their patient population, the kind of injury we had to justify that kind of surgery. It was really, really precise the way they do that. That's one of the first things they do surgery? When they develop that. For this particular surgery I had, very strictly defined patient protocol. If you go read these trans studies, they put all of us together like this giant soup and try to draw conclusions with it. It is absolutely true. Go read it in the cohort breakdown. They will put FTMs in there with MTFs, with non-binaries, with trans femmes, with trans masks, and they'll draw all these big conclusions. And one of the consequences of that in these studies is it makes it very hard for us to go down to any one of these cohorts and drill deeply and draw conclusions. The ends are also very small. These are underfunded studies. They're not of great quality. Do you think that's a problem?
Adult care has been shown to be beneficial.
Yes.
When protocols were put in place for adolescents, the presumption was that would only extend and probably benefit people because they would not have to overcome the obstacle of having puberty-related physical changes. In other words, if they could block puberty before it began, then when they went through their desired puberty, they would not have an Adam's apple development, let's say, or a voice drop for trans feminine persons, or breast development for trans masculine persons, meaning they would potentially avoid future surgeries and from that, potentially a higher quality of care based on
and less dysphoria,
what has been seen
right?
in the future. That is, if you can accurately identify people for whom treatment fits. And that's the key question. And can you also give them a proper informed consent that they can look forward to the lack of, let's say, the one thing that has bothered me consistently is that by giving gender affirming blockers, that precludes any chance for them to have fertility versus waiting a couple of years into puberty before choosing to block. And so you may be aware that I have a bit more of a conservative viewpoint on that matter as compared to my peers.
But okay, like I just like I've never. This is just like it's such an easy ban. So from what I gather, they're purity testing, there's studies and science. Typical leftoid eating themselves behavior. Like that isn't easy. 24-hour timeout. We'll see if you come back tomorrow and say something less obnoxiously retarded. Holy fuck. I don't like these people either. But what a retarded level of engagement. You sound so low IQ. Holy fuck.
But I think there are people moving towards the opinion that I have and that I'd like to see puberty blockers initiated later.
They're purity testing their studies and science? Yeah. Yeah. That's what you do. Really, they're scrutinizing their studies and science? Yes.
Later. In other words, slightly after the onset of puberty. I think that ultimately will be the responsible choice. But that's going to take prospective studies. That's going to be looking at people and deciding, how did they do with puberty blockers initiated at Tanner 2 versus Tanner 3 or 4. And how do those patients look? Those
are stages of puberty, just for the audience. Those are
stages of puberty.
Yeah. Okay.
And the Dutch protocol, remember, recommended puberty blockers beginning at age 14 and then cross-sex hormones later. So that was fully through puberty before those. And then it was the American Norman Spack and others who began, they said, well, why not avoid puberty changes altogether and start this at Tanner 2?
Mm-hmm.
And, rightfully, the criticism, could be there. Was there data to support that? No. But the presumption was that the the benefits would extend to the earlier grouping if you could identify those persons properly. And Dr. Spack pointed out that it was the onset of puberty, those changes that aggravated dysphoria, that was a deciding factor in who could be, we don't like using the word truly transgender, but those for whom their trans feelings would persist.
So I think this is where I think we've got healthcare is not about politics, but I think the politics are really hard to avoid here.
Well, how did that have anything to do with politics? She's just saying that, yeah, if the puberty tends to be the point at which it is determined whether someone's transgender feelings are going to persist for the rest of their life or not. As such, around puberty is when you should be trying to identify whether they are the type of person experiencing trans issues who is going to benefit from some kind of medical intervention or not. What does that have to do with politics, Brianna? Please. How are you going to insert retarded politics shit into this? That sounded totally reasonable. Obviously, you can disagree, and you want to, argue down the method of selecting which teenagers would benefit from this treatment. You would want to argue, how sure you have to be before signing off on a teenager getting this kind of treatment. But as a fundamental point, that makes sense. I don't see how anyone who's reasonably engaging with the conversation could take issue with that.
Marcy, I don't have to tell you that the United States is really turning away from access, like children's access to care, in a way that terrifies me. And I think you and I both understand what it was like to be that scared little child that desperately needed some help, and to see your body changing into something that was very difficult to live with. This is really, really, really scary to me. And I understand, like, as I do my job, I cannot base...
So now you're just having an emotional reaction. Okay, epic.
Like, the policies I advocate on my personal story, but I also know, like, the consequence of that healthcare not being there. Like, we did not have gender affirming clinics in Mississippi in 1980. So,
and that adds
at the same
greatly
time,
to stress.
Yeah.
Of course, it really broke. When you did my vaginoplasty in Colorado, I was a broken person, still trying to deal with the trauma. I've got my head on pretty good now, but it took me a long time.
Oh, yeah? From that. Yeah, you're displaying that in this conversation where you can't disagree with someone that's screaming at them.
So I understand there's a human cost here, but I really think
that straining her crumbling throat. Marcy, you're... Just like every fucking 5 minutes.
There's got to be a reckoning with the fact that I don't think we've been. I think we've not messaged multiple things.
WPATH is not the enemy.
I think it is, but we can talk about that.
I
think there are multiple things.
This medical body is the enemy. Oh my god!
I think there are
not. I think there are not multiple things we are not doing well with parents. So I think, first of all, I think that no one needed to tell me I wanted to be a girl when I was 5 years old. No one needed to tell me that 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's all I could think about ever. And I think that this political project with the best of intentions, to put this material into schools, to cause children to deeply question.
Now what are we talking about now? Now what are you fucking talking about? This was about identifying which pubescent teenagers might have their trans feelings persist and which ones are going to be benefited by some kind of intervention before the age of 18. That's what the conversation was. Now we're on about them putting trans books in schools. Where have we gone? How did we get here? This isn't related to the point you were disagreeing on.
Their gender, and to suggest that they can mix and match their gender, I think that it is objectively confusing the kids. And I can tell you, as someone who works in Democratic...
Fuck are you talking about right now? What the fuck are you talking about? This is not relevant to the point we were on. What?
Politics. It is turning not right-wing.
Have you been into an elementary school?
Marcy?
I have, actually.
Dude.
You can talk
just laughing in Brianna's face.
to Democratic moms. It's not just conservatives across this country. They are really upset because they think that their children are being confused.
Well, fortunately, the Department of Education has been dismantled.
Good.
So I guess we don't.
So true. Dude, Brianna's embarrassing herself. How is she still claiming to be a lefty if she's just spending all her fucking time bitching about this?
For their development. And we have no long-term studies about what introducing these ideas into children when they're very young does to their development.
They're not interested. They're introducing.
The second part of this is we have not. The second part of this. The second part of this.
Yeah, remember, we were disagreeing about the point that this was coming from was Marcy said that it seems to be that puberty aggravates feelings of gender dysphoria. And either they go away in that time or they get worse. And if they get worse, oftentimes those people will have persistent gender dysphoria that sticks around and doesn't get alleviated by therapy. So around puberty, we need to start considering, okay, is this person someone with persistent gender dysphoria or someone who's going to desist? Is this person someone that's going to benefit from some kind of medical intervention? Or should this person just be allowed to experiment socially, talk to a therapist, and they'll probably get over it? That's what it's about. How do we identify? We should start looking around puberty. This is a time when you should be identifying, is this person, not they shouldn't say the words, but truly transgender or not? Totally reasonable. Brianna's like, well, the thing is that there's all these trans books in schools. This is so boring, then you won't mind being permanently removed from the channel, will you? You won't mind never coming back into chat ever again because you're bored.
For the Tennessee case came out is that with lowering the protocols for children and not being straight with parents about the science behind it, I think the WPATH has not been straightforward about it. We've not been
WPATH hasn't had a
suicidality.
Please. They're not going into school systems. They're not recruiting. They're we're
I'm
underserved.
talking about a different subject now, which is you're changing.
You're
talking
so
you're
long,
making an
Brianna.
argument.
They disappeared. I know, and I feel almost bad for banning them now. I am going to unban them, but I'm going to apply a 1-day timeout so they don't have to be here for this boring content. It's getting, decent views, and the video will do well too.
It's pretty even. Respond. Marcy, you don't even get a chance.
Yeah.
You just spew out.
If it was actually fucking boring, there wouldn't be people here, would there? I'm capable of reading a fucking incentive structure here, okay? And the incentive structure is telling me to keep covering this
information.
You're wrong.
Then you don't let anyone talk.
No, it's not true. We'll run the counter when this goes out. You'll see you've talked much more.
Oh, okay.
So what I was saying is you're now doing something you've done multiple times here, which is you're taking something from a past subject and you're taking it to attack a current subject. We're talking two things here. I'm saying the political project, which I did not say was associated with WPATH, to bring gender ideology into schools is confusing children. It's creating enemies from parents.
Who's doing this, Brianna? Let me hear what your sources for your...
I think this is boring. Please Google old FTMs kissing, dude.
Conspiracy theories are.
It's a fucking daily, man.
Who's bringing these ideas of gender confusion into schools?
Marcy,
can you just answer that?
I'm going to finish my point. And you can sit there and listen to it and try to engage with it so we can have a discussion here. So that is one part of it. The second part
bringing
is
this ideology? I want to know.
WPATH's lack of transparency with parents about every single part of this. We've overstated the case about how beneficial this is for children.
Ooh, you're not on You're not a member of WPATH.
Yeah,
we're going to actually lower. Can I just finish? The age restrictions, we're going to lower the minimum ages for certain procedures. And instead, we thought about it. There was a lot of input. We had an open forum where membership was allowed to put input into the final version of the standards of care. And ultimately, it was a bit at the 11th hour, but WPATH elected to drop back to a more conservative viewpoint, which was to remove the age restrictions and go back to the default position, which is the standards that we set in version 7. That's it. So it was version 8 basically is version 7 where it comes to the age restrictions. That's it. We didn't remove age restrictions. We didn't say that it could be done now at any age, But what we did is we said it goes back to the version 7 age.
Okay, so what they were thinking of basically lowering the restrictions by moving to an age model where it's like after a certain age you can do this, but instead they kept the existing model which relied on, I guess, milestones in the treatment or like referrals and stuff like that actually in function means that it's more difficult to get these treatments. But Brianna has presented that as they got rid of the age restriction, as if to say younger kids can get it now. But that's not the truth. They're actually maintaining the older, more conservative model.
Restrictions, which means that its care is delivered on an individualized basis, based on decisions between parents, family, and the individual. Physicians and the individual.
So I just to make sure I understand that there was no age in 7, and then there was an 8, and then you got rid of it to be back the same as 7. That's basically.
That's right. Generally, it was presumed to be the age of majority, which is 18 in this country for the most part, and that was the generally accepted age. But the lack of a specific, it didn't say it had to be 18 or older. It left it open because there were instances in harm reduction, especially for transmasculine persons who were potentially in vulnerable situations where their breasts could be a marker for transness and could put them, Boys Don't Cry, the trans boy that was killed, that movie, that kind of situation where the presence of breast material would be dangerous. And so in those cases, surgery could be instituted.
All right.
So version 8 was going to drop that, and write it in. But what I was afraid of, this is just my own personal view, I was afraid that it was just going to put a very arbitrary, because it wasn't based on, you're right, in the sense it wasn't based on science. It was based on, this was where Delphi played in, but it was just putting an arbitrary age limit, let's say 16. And that would mean that all you had to do is get over that hurdle, and then everyone would feel entitled to surgery at that age. That bothered me.
And that's like totally reasonable. That's totally reasonable. Anyone, even trans skeptic people, like anti-trans people, that sounds totally reasonable to me. That they wanted individualized treatment plans instead of this idea that just once you're fucking 16, you can get whatever you wanted done. That seems totally reasonable. Like for adolescent care, like you might get 1 or 2 15-year-olds get through, but I think broadly that's gonna make the age older. You're gonna be more sure about the people who are getting it done, right? You don't want arbitrary barriers that mean that once you get over a line, you can just get whatever you want done. You want, like what is it? Fuck, I can't remember which way around they are. Wait, is it? The in-depth one is qualitative, right? You want some kind of more in-depth analysis of the person's situation. I fucking suck with stats, man. It's qualitative analysis is when you look at the qualities. Well, yeah, obviously quality and quantitative would be quantities. Yeah, quality and quantity. Yes. Yeah.
And I much preferred
it's in the word.
The assumption being the version 7 version, where it was generally 18 with individual exceptions.
It is in the word, but I don't know. I was like, am I getting this wrong?
Rather than an entitled age hurdle where you reached it.
Anytime I use some kind of technical word, I'm like, fuck, am I using this wrong? I've just heard erudite and shit do it so many times. They choose a word completely wrong, but so confidently. I have to like check myself 6 times.
Surgery. I didn't like that. So what we settled on was...
Isn't it qualitative, like that Xanderhall shit?
It's more conservative. Okay?
Sure. I do not have a problem necessarily with leaving exact limits between a patient, a parent, and their doctor in these cases. I really don't. I understand that. I think your logic is sound. My point, which I would invite you to engage with, is that I think it makes the political sell much harder for parents in this country to believe in gender-affirming care for minors, something polls are disastrous on right now. I truly don't think it could be saved. And the reason I'm here today is trying to make an environment where someone credible can make the case for this. And I think what has happened is there's been a lack of honesty with parents. And I think we've not been straight with the science.
That
and I
is
think
so
the stuff
not-
that came
that
out in the
that's
Tennessee
just not fair.
lawsuit against you was disastrous, Marcy. It was
Tennessee,
absolutely disastrous.
I'm not aware of any lawsuit. I'm not in any lawsuit in Tennessee.
If you want to reference the arguments,
there's no lawsuit against me in Tennessee.
There was the amicus brief in the Tennessee case, which went through your emails and WPATH emails point by point by point, and had you getting your story straight behind the scenes.
That's
in
not
a way
a,
that
that's
does
not a lawsuit.
It does not give credibility to WPATH. It does not make parents feel like there's actual science.
The smoking
You're
gun.
Handing our enemies. You're handing our enemies everything
what
they
we
need
call
to
in the
destroy our
medical field
care because you cannot be straightforward with parents, Marcy.
Personal.
You've got to be straightforward with them about what you know.
Burger. Nothing
You've
burger.
got to know.
Well,
You've got to be straight with them.
Let me use a very specific example, Brianna.
It's not funny. You've been lying to parents.
No one's been lying.
Bro, what? She's totally what? She's totally sparking out. You're lying to parents. What? What is going on?
You 100% have been lying.
If you want,
guys, I need to get food. I need to have a snack before the next segment. I can't even AFK because she's sparking out constantly.
If you want to use a specific example from the WPATH files, there were the quotes people from a Zoom call saying things like, "It's always good in theory that you talk about fertility preservation with a 14-year-old, but I know I'm talking to a blank wall." Things like that, where, there's a bunch of doctors nodding about, they have.
Where does it say the doctors are nodding?
Oh, I watched. It's a Zoom call with 6 people, and I think at least 3 were nodding.
Well, that doesn't give good optics.
No, it wasn't great. And I think when it comes,
fertility is important. I think I already mentioned that earlier in the
call.
That's a big thing that I would have been if I was a trans kid and somebody was going to block my puberty and not talk about fertility. I'd be pretty upset.
Well, but it's not about talking. He said he talks about fertility preservation.
Who is he?
At 14 years old, it's like I'm talking to a blank wall.
Who is he?
I will find it out. It's in one of the videos from whatever the files were released. They also said things like they haven't even had biology in high school, or they can't talk about it in a serious way.
This is the WPATH member for sure.
Yeah, these are all WPATH members. Yes. So the point is, this is complicated.
I would disagree with whoever said that, and
it's these things are complicated.
But it hurts public trust when this stuff gets out there. You understand that, yes?
It's not a yes or no answer, Brianna, and I think you should know that.
Do you not think WPATH's reputation is destroyed?
Care is delivered. This is the same thing about the informed consent. One person can give a very good informed consent, and I'll be honest, I don't. It's very difficult to do that with the weight of giving enough balance to what the pros and cons really are. To give true informed consent, it has to be quite a masterful performance in that it has to be delivered with true integrity. And that's a high bar for many people.
That is a high bar. I mean, do you think that is a bar that can scale throughout every gender clinician and physician?
They do
the moderator's
such a good job.
Terrible,
but again,
man.
This is why in the way the members that I know that practice, we talk about longevity, and it's a persistence. It's a process. It is not a rushed. It's not a vending machine type of process, nor should it ever be that way. It takes a lot of thought. Hormones are serious business. Surgery is a major step. And it's got to be we've got to be better at defining who is our best candidate. And the point is that it takes a great deal of thought and and sincerity and passion to deal with these families in difficult times through a difficult period of their lives. And you don't rush that process. This is why puberty blockers did make a lot of sense, because it put puberty on pause. And it did so with an incredible amount of safety in a medication that's been used for 50 years in the same age population without side effects or complications. And in that sense is completely reversible should the process go awry or should the feelings change.
I don't deal with the clinic. I deal with the political aftermath of what.
Okay, I hate the totally reversible phrasing. It's not totally reversible. Like you didn't go through puberty at those ages. Like you don't suddenly puberty doesn't time travel back and happen at those ages instead. It's like that's not how it works. It's like it can still affect your development, still affect not just physical development, social development. They're completely reversible. It's just not true. It's like retarded framing.
You choose to do. I have gone down to DC 5 times at this point trying to come up with a strategy to counter these Trump EOs to destroy our healthcare, to destroy the dollars allocated for our research. I'm cleaning up this mess. So you may not want to answer it when I think say, so, do you understand that the decisions WPATH is working is creating a political problem that is letting Republicans destroy our healthcare, but it's a real problem.
I don't agree. I think we've done things with an incredible amount of integrity. So I disagree.
Failing.
I'd say no.
You're failing.
Incredible integrity.
Let's talk about.
Oh, Brianna. That's so not true.
Okay, then we disagree.
Yeah, if they just said like physically reversible or something like that, I'd be less opposed to it. Just say like physically, some shit like that. Saying totally reversible, it's just not true. It's just like, and there's so many people just repeat that line uncritically, saying totally reversible, and then it's just not. That's not really the case.
Point of the podcast, and thank you both for hanging in there. Let's talk about the future. What is, Brianna, you're two of the most important trans activists in the country and world right now. What is the future, Brianna, when you look at the trans rights movement? What is an affirmative vision that you want to put out? And then Marcy, I'll ask you the same thing.
So I think that the fundamental problem with WPATH is an activist
WPATH is not the enemy. Stop.
Yeah.
I'm going to finish what I'm saying. Please act like an adult. It's not.
Yeah. Fun. Oh yeah. It's Marcy not acting like an adult. Yeah. Okay, Brianna. Dude, Marcy's laughing at her. Dude.
The problem with WPATH is
WPATH is not the enemy. Stop.
Yeah.
I'm going to finish what I'm saying. Please act like an adult. It's not funny. Your behavior here is
no. Come on, everyone's doing their best. Keep going.
So my fundamental problem is I think WPATH, the thing that gave me the pathway to have a successful life, a good marriage, a good job, all that stuff. WPATH used to be the Benjamins.
Dude, does Brianna does she ever have an appearance where people come away going, yeah, Brianna totally owned there. Whoa, Brianna totally owned. Like when she gets like pissed off, does it ever happen?
It's been ideologically captured. And is putting out policy proposals that there's no scientific evidence for.
Like who likes Brianna Wu? I swear she is just a pariah everywhere she goes, no?
Stuff, including
when Olive Oath is in chat.
Which there's not the evidence that we've made the case for. I think we have activists that are out there.
Isn't that the one who got like assaulted in a bar for
we got the evidence
being trans?
It's dead. We're dead sure about it.
But then was isn't Olive Oath someone? I feel like I'm trying to map things on here. Didn't that Olive Oath person? Aren't they a trans person that simultaneously gets assaulted in bars for being obviously trans while also claiming to pass and be like a parsoid? I think, yeah.
There's a parallel right-wing project led by GenSpec, the awful people at GenSpec and SEGM, and, Manhattan Institute to a lesser extent, but primarily them, to go through and fact-check all of this and create a political shitstorm about every part of it because they're looking into your claims and they don't check out. So this relates to what I'm saying, Alex. The future of trans healthcare has got to be, we need some organization that is advocating for transsexuals that really cares about the science, that really cares about the things that we say being.
So guys, if you're enjoying this epic trans healthcare debate content, classic epic trans healthcare debate content, remember, okay, 565 of you here, 91 likes on stream. Maybe about 470 people could like the stream right now, but haven't. So if you wouldn't mind, please, maybe you guys a thumbs up and clicking it, or pressing a thumbs up on your mobile device. That'd be huge appreciated. Now, if you want to take your support one step further, you can donate directly through the Stream Elements link in the pin chat message. You can also buy a membership to the channel, gift a membership to the channel, gift a whole bunch of memberships randomly throughout the chat, buy a super chat which will highlight your message, read it out on TTS, and it will contribute to the goal that I think is still active. No, the goal ended. Sorry, the goal ended. I should start a new goal. There's now a goal active. It's called Epic Goal. Epic Goal in chat. It will contribute to the goal. You can also buy super stickers, which are YouTube image or GIF. They'll be highlighted in chat, and I'll describe it to you. Or you can go to discord.gg/Kuihman, twitter.com/Kuihman, or reddit.com/r/Kuihman. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
True and making that case to the public with integrity and without this clown show that's been going on. At the same time, we need a new generation of activists out there that are willing to not message this as a fringe leftist issue. It is a problem that almost every single political trans person out there is on the fringe left, and most of them are communist. You know, something I talk a lot about is Israel policy. And one of the smart things that Jews have done here in the United States is they've made their civil rights as best as they can a nonpartisan issue. It's not left versus right. They'll talk to the right wing when they can. They'll talk to the left wing when they can. I want to do that with trans.
Yeah, pure Twitter brain. I do not see that many commie trans people. I understand it is a thing on Twitter. When I look around in the media, the only trans people I see are like Brianna Wu. It's like Brianna Wu. Caffles is gone. Caitlyn Jenner. Blair White. No, Caffles is still gone. I understand that Caffles is streaming again, but Caffles is nothing. Caffles is not even a blip on the map anymore. Yeah, I don't see like that. I don't see these commie trans people. It's like, this is like a Twitter stereotype.
This needs to be non-ideological, non-partisan.
Thank you for the $10, McMahon. Thank you.
Republicans with respect and like they are adults. So I think the future of trans healthcare has got to be getting back to basics, getting away from these fringe politics, and stopping lying to people about what we know, because we don't know a lot about trans healthcare.
Long statement.
So,
can I?
That was Marcy. Now, yes,
can I pick up on that?
Both respond and but also state your affirmative vision for where you think we should be going.
So, you know, you don't, as we used to say, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. WPATH was established in 1979 specifically because there were clinicians operating without any sort of standards or guidelines. So it was convened as an evidence base, which means science and clinical experience. It's represented by clinicians and scientists from around the world. These are not just fringe people. These are not.
Thank you for the $2, March Baby Chicken Jockey. I'm not gonna lie, the Minecraft movie irony posting is not hitting for me. It's not that funny. I saw the Chicken Jockey video from in the cinema. I was like, okay, it's kind of funny that people like cheering and pretending they care about it. Like, that's a kind of funny moment, I guess. But the moment I started seeing people reference it and joke about it, it's like, no, this sucks. This isn't funny. Fuentes supports it. I understand Fuentes supports it, but I can't see that Fuentes will stick by it for very long. I think it's just a moment. You know? I think it's just a moment. It's like this isn't even going to be a week or a month. This is like a couple days. Like, Chicken Jockey. And the Poe. You know, that's it. It's like there's nothing else to it.
Extremists and activists. These are, for the most part, clinicians. There are Republicans and there are Democrats. I do agree with Brianna that we need, going forward, the clarity and the ability to talk on to everyone is important. There are very reasoned, thoughtful, well-minded people throughout the ideological middle.
Can I jump in here, Alex?
No, wait, I'm just getting to my vision here. So my vision is that we see further coalescence of the major medical groups, which have rallied around WPATH, because they're looking at the same science you are, and they come up with a different conclusion. Politically based reports like the Cass report notwithstanding, Sweden, which has been often cited as a country where they've restricted trans care, what they've really done is they've just simply funded science where every person who is treated in adolescence is now part of research. And when that research emerges, how are you going to react? Because it's probably going to be affirming that trans care saves lives, betters lives, and serves a small part of the population that is no threat to social order.
So I think this is a really good point to like draw the distinctions between the differences for where we see trans healthcare.
Let's keep it on our on sort of.
Let's not insult WPATH anymore.
100%.
Exactly.
That just doesn't help.
Hold on. There's some accountability that needs to be there, but that's not my point.
I wish you'd.
This is where I will talk to you literally anytime. Alex, please send her my number. Sure.
So let's do this. And first off, this is our final exercise, and it's how we end every podcast. It's called Steel Manning. But first, thank you. This was a difficult conversation.
Dude, sorry, I tuned out for the last moment. I try to run that back a minute.
I do agree with Brianna that we need, going forward, the clarity and the ability to talk on to everyone is important. There are very reasoned, thoughtful, well-minded people throughout the ideological middle.
Can I jump in here, Alex?
No, wait, I'm just getting to my vision here.
My
vision is that
Brianna literally can't let her talk for more than 2 seconds. It's so insane.
We see further coalescence of the major medical groups, which have rallied around WPATH, because they're looking at the same science you are, and they come up with a different conclusion. Politically based reports like the Cass report notwithstanding, Sweden, which has been often cited as a country where they've restricted trans care, what they've really done is they've just simply funded science where every person who is treated in adolescence is now part of research. And when that research emerges, how are you going to react? Because it's probably going to be affirming that trans care saves lives, betters lives, and serves a small part of the population that is no threat to social order.
So I think this is a really good point to like draw the distinctions between the differences for where we see trans healthcare.
Let's keep it on our on sort of.
Let's not insult WPATH anymore.
100%.
Exactly.
That just doesn't help.
Hold on. There's some accountability that needs to be there, but that's
Dude, Brianna is just behaving like an absolute fucking child. Just say your perspective without spazzing out this organization.
This is where I will talk to you literally anytime. Alex, please send her my number. Sure.
So let's do this. And first off, this is our final exercise, and it's how we end every podcast. It's called Steel Manning. But first, thank you. This was a difficult conversation. We're going to end on a strong note, but honestly, we need more of this. I think
I'm on the side. I'm not giving hormones to kids or making bullshit research. Wow, brave stance, Smith. Thank you.
There are hard conversations that need to be had, and I just so appreciate both of you working through this. So I just
no hormones for kids ever.
The last thing we do is steel manning. So it's when you take your disagreement partner's arguments and you say them in the first person affirmatively in the best faith possible, just to show that
yes, never. Okay, Smith. So what about if they've got some kind of deficiency where they actually need medication?
You were listening, you understand, and that's it. So would one of you like to go first?
I would love to go first. Okay. I will even add some more good faith context. Marcy, like yourself, I am a public figure, and I understand what it's like to be under attack by all quarters. And I think a important background information for everything you've said today is there has been a massive project to go after you personally in cruel ways that I've watched for a decade now. And I think that's really important. I understand how exhausting it is being in the crosshairs of these people. So
you don't believe that one either, Smith, but we can. I'm not going to run down it in chat.
I think that you, as a clinician, have come into an organization that's like herding cats. And I think you've tried to make the best case you can with all these different groups.
That wasn't taking my side on anything.
Can you do
sure.
do first
Hold
person?
On, well,
like,
let me.
Okay.
Sure. And I think that you are saying that with the methods that you
Brianna's not on the right side. Brianna is just spazzing out about vague, negative notions about trans healthcare. She's not staking any intelligent position. Being on the right side is staking an intelligent position, having a belief that is well reasoned. Being on the right side is not having a vague negative sentiment about trans healthcare. A doctor who is making informed, intelligent decisions that are focused around getting the best for our patients is always going to be operating on more of the right side than anyone who's operating on pure emotion and just going, oh, this seems bad. This seems really bad. That's always more on the right side to any reasonable person.
How the Delphi approach to all of this, you
it
feel like
not to all of this. But go ahead.
Oh, you got to let it. All right, you can grade it. You know what, Marcy? You can give it an A, B, C.
Let me start.
Yeah, start over.
Let's see if I can.
Start over first person.
Marcy thinks that WPATH has done a great job with this.
I didn't say
that the science is sound of it, and that by expanding these cohorts, she thinks that do you think that WPATH is not the enemy? And I think you think that the strongest evidence that the WPATH is based in science is the length of that document. And I think you feel like it is an organization that has a lot of integrity.
All right, Marcy, your turn. Your turn.
Well, I think there is overwhelming evidence for adult care, but that some of the evidence for gender affirming care in adolescence would be of lower grade, meaning individuals could get treated who shouldn't be treated, and that pop-up clinics, hormones on demand is not something that should be offered to the general public. But I'm not going to agree with you that WPATH is the enemy.
Okay.
So look at the difference between the stillmans I give there. Brianna Wu just like totally retarded, like the most just like dishonest, retarded, lazy engagement with it ever. Marcy actually reasonably conveyed the strongest points Brianna was making. Like, yeah, you shouldn't just get hormones on demand. These pop-up clinics just giving out hormones, yes, that's obviously not a good idea. The research for adolescents is obviously nowhere near on the standard or extent that we have for adults. Like, yeah, that's totally, it's just so insane. It just shows the difference in the conversation so blatantly.
That was sort of a steelman. That was sort of your own position. I feel like it was your own position, but it was a critical position. So it's an inflection.
Well, she said, I believe that there's this huge amount of data and research. Here are the criticisms that Brianna made that make sense. That's what she said, basically. Brianna didn't even attempt to steelman. But in Marcy's response, that absolutely was. It laid out Brianna's best criticisms in a way that made sense for the conversation, which is better than Brianna could do.
So, all right, this was really excellent. I will give you both an email so that you can continue it, because I do think you are very important voices, and I've learned an incredible amount today.
Just to revisit the original reason, both of us care very deeply about trans people getting the health care that they need. And again, it saved my life. And
Smith, why are you pretending that you care about the data and research when you have a philosophical position about transitioning? You don't care about the data and research. Don't pretend you care about the data and research. It's not part of your thought process on this. You're so close to Mr. Girl on this. I know what your thought process is. The data and research doesn't actually matter.
Marcy, again, thank you for the surgery you gave me. It radically improved my life. All of us want to get to the right answers, even if we don't agree on the problems.
Well, that means a lot to me.
I mean it.
And yeah, you're a very wise and sharply focused individual, and I hope that we can cross paths again sometime in the future,
dude.
You can literally call me anytime.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Well, I give out I think I gave you my cell phone number. I've given out to every single patient for the last 23 years.
Oh, really? I'll go look at my...
You gotta go look it up.
I'm sure you have it.
I had to do to give my passport.
Take a look. It's probably still on your phone.
Same thing. All right.
Yeah, she debated her own bottom surgeon. Yes.
Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex. And thanks, Bree.
Thank you.
Wow.